What is up, my planting people? My name is Lithius and welcome to Roots Ready. This is an exciting video for me. If you have been following my journey on this channel, you will know that this was the very first plant that I ever recorded. So it is now 2 months later, and I have an update for you guys. So this plant I purchased at the beginning of December, and at the time of filming it is now the end of February. So it's been 2 months in the making, but nevertheless we have some progress. I'm here just to tell you what I have learned so far and how I have managed to get this plant to bud. So firstly, here we go. This is it. Look at that. Looking really good. So when I first potted this plant up, I had it in my greenhouse, and it was in there for around 3 weeks. Now, I am not the most patient person when it comes to my plants, because I know the potential that this plant has and the beauty that it has. I really wanted to see some growth really quickly. So after around 3 weeks, what I decided to do was to pull this plant out of the greenhouse, put it in a self-contained bag, spray it down with some water, and leave it in a really super high humid environment. What happened was, after a week or so, I realized that the plant was actually developing some mold just around the edges. When I realized this, I quickly pulled the plant out and I put it back into the greenhouse, where the humidity levels are around 75%. But more importantly, in my greenhouse I have a fan, and that ensures that there is really good air circulation. And I think the combination of the higher humidity level, which is around 75% in my greenhouse, and the air circulation really prevented the plant from developing any further mold. So that was amazing, and that was really good. So that was one of the big lessons that I learned going in. The second lesson that I learned was by complete accident. So in my greenhouse, I have been trying to save an Ethereum aureum, and I had it in a humidity box in my greenhouse. And you know, I know that these plants really do love heat to stimulate root growth. So what I did is I went ahead and I bought myself a heat mat. And because the heat mat was just large enough to fit into my mini greenhouse, this plant was directly on top of it. Now at this point, this plant had taken so long to bud, and I had bought so many other new plants that my focus had slightly shifted away from it. So I wasn't really checking on it every single day. Maybe once every 4 to 5 days I would go in and give it a bit of water. But apart from that, it was sort of just tucked away at the back of my mind. But one day, about a week to 2 weeks after purchasing the heat mat and having this plant directly on top of it, I noticed that there was a glimmer of hope. And now look at it. It's been about 2 weeks later, and that tiny bud has turned into this mini stem right here. And trust me guys, I couldn't be any happier. Just look at it. I can already see that it's branching. I can see the first signs of leaves. This plant is going to be just fine. Typically, the Stephania Erecta does tend to bud before it roots, but I am happy to report that we also have some roots. Now I'm going to gently lift this plant up out of the pot and show you guys the one and the tiniest root ever. Just have a look at that. So that's the one root. Now I wouldn't advise pulling your plant out of its pot too often. That was just for demonstration purposes, just to let you guys know that this plant is doing well. So after 2 months, we finally have some growth, and I am really convinced that I could have promoted some growth even earlier if I knew what I know now. So for anyone who is looking to buy this plant, or you do have it and you are struggling to get it to grow, then my advice to you is ensure that you have this plant in an area with high humidity, caveat that with good air circulation, and have it in an area that is warm. Now I know that not everyone will have a greenhouse or will want to even get a heat mat, and that's completely fine. I think that in the summer months and in the springtime when the weather is warmer, it'll be so much easier to get this plant to bud, because that is its growing season. But if it is the winter months and you want to promote some growth, then my advice is to have it in an area with high humidity. Now you can do this by regularly spritzing your plant down, but importantly have it in an area that is warm. So I would recommend having it next to a heater, not directly above it, because that could cause some damage, but as close to it as possible without risking damaging the plant. And apart from that, it has been an absolute joy to grow this plant so far. It hasn't been a tremendous amount of work. In terms of watering, I water this plant maybe once every week, which is plenty for it, especially as it hasn't got any or much in the way of growth. And I waited until the soil was almost completely dry. The addition of the heat map meant that the soil was drying out a lot quicker, but the plant is doing great. And if you follow my recommendations, I am really sure and certain that you will be able to get your plant to bud as quickly as possible. So those were my top tips for getting your Stephania to bud. I will be back with an update on this plant in a couple of weeks, so if you are interested, then consider subscribing to this channel so that you don't miss that video. I'm also over on Instagram where I provide updates on my plants, especially this one. So if you're interested, you can consider following my page, which is @RootsReady. But that was it, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and keep planting.